Namaste, Jai Bharat. Actually, if things were other way around, the world knowledge tradition would have been more or less related to one another or one. I am of that view. Would have been one fundamental base structure with multiple superstructures depending upon multiple societies in the world. That's how the Rigveda understands multiplicity and plurality. The Rigveda talks about an epistemology of coexistence of the multiple and plural. That's the last sukta of Rigveda. You can find it mostly in internet. Try. But interpretations, one has to go to a teacher. Well, one has to go to a teacher to understand the Vedas because the Vedic suktas do not give direct meaning as they were composed in such a manner to remain dynamic with innovations as it comes, with possibilities of implications and re-implications given renewed or anew space and time from time to time. So this makes the whole Rigveda life and dynamic. That's why even Maharshi Aurobindo also instructs that you don't learn Veda by yourselves. You go to a teacher to learn, because a teacher, Acharya, who would interpret things for you, that again is very dynamic, depending upon the sthai bhava, that's permanent mental dispositions and mental requirement of the person sitting in front of the teacher. So interpretation will go in your direction, making it unique and at the same time dynamic, thriving with vitality of life. So that would make the Vedas ever life, thriving, dynamic, filled with activities. So that's one point. That's what I was trying, not what I was trying to say. I was trying to say if the world would have been different, then perhaps you could have had one knowledge tradition or related to one another. See, let's talk about Europe. Let's not talk about Bharat, because Bharat's knowledge system knowledge tradition began in time that we don't understand. How back? You don't have the scientific techniques going back into time beyond certain period. We have some limits of this carbon dating techniques or whatever techniques. They are not limitless. They have a time set period where you have to stop. Beyond that, things won't become very clear. So, we do not know about the antiquity of the Vedas. First of all, Vedas got composed, not really written, much later in the place called as Naimisharanya, which is near Lucknow, by Maharshi Vyasa and his team. But they existed before that through the Bharatiya Hindu tradition of Shruti, Smriti, etc. That's what I said, we just can't talk about Bharat like that. Let's talk about Europe when you have time set clearly. The European knowledge begins after papacy is a settled matter, unquestioned matter. During papacy, they call themselves dark period, medieval period. They call themselves dark period because nothing new evolved. That's what their logic is. But I would say that nothing really happened. There was a time when there were pirates and barbarians and looters and quarreling tribes, warring tribes. You have the stories, the great Vikings, etc., seafaring people, etc., the Norsemen. All these things are there in the history. They had some kind of settled existence after that, much later, but meaningful investigations into knowledge begins after the supremacy of Pope, which is called papacy. That's much later. That's much later. That's after the Protestant revolt against the unquestioned supremacy of Pope and Catholic Church. Then only they started revolting, and then the revolutions were mechanically very fast because cognitive sciences developed. So they have developed more on empirical studies and empirical sciences. But the treasure of knowledge did not. They never had it in the past. They had only speculations. And for all those things, the entire Europe began from a ready-made model which they got from the Greeks. The Greeks have a knowledge tradition. The Greeks had philosophy for a very short period. This period is between, strictly speaking, between Socrates and Alexander. Not much of a time. Socrates as a student, Plato was a student, Aristotle, and of course Aristotle's student was this Alexander, son of Philip of Macedonia, who had been a conqueror, not a philosopher. Before Socrates, there were thinkers in Greece, and they themselves consider Thales of Greece as the first thinker. Truly, he had his own theories. And Thales' student contemporary was Anaximander, who is supposed to have written a book on physics. One of my students was once asking him, when he was my PhD student, said, how many papyrus scrolls Anaximander must have used to write? That question really blown off my mind. No papers. So that's a very interesting question for which I don't have an answer. How they're preserved. They don't have this tradition of Shruti Smriti through which they could have preserved. No, that's again besides the point. So this is a Greek knowledge tradition, and primarily we can only recognize three. Thales' contribution is great, and Thales is the one who spoke about 5 gross elements as fundamental to everything, which interestingly he had learned from Bharat. Not that he came to Bharat to learn, but he had come across some Punjabi merchants who discussed, these merchants, many of them were scholarly. These Punjabi merchants who had discussed with the Thales about Panchabhutas. Panchabhutas are 5 principles that Vyoma, I'll speak in English, but the sky, earth, water, air, etc. 5 of them, which are 5 principles or sources of power, sources of authority. That Thales, poor fellow, understood as elements, so he propounded the theory of 5 gross elements, which still is dumbly getting taught in our teaching places from schools to universities. That's how you could understand, because Thales do not have that kind of a background from which Punjabi merchants had been traveling. They were going for trading, but these are side products, tributaries to trading, I suppose. Similarly, then this Greek knowledge tradition came into existence, but especially the Greeks were concerned about every aspect of philosophy as it is in Bharat. Now, I set the story of Thales of Greece and Punjabi merchants to begin an understanding, to create an understanding in anyone who hears that how connected they were from Bharat, wantingly or unwantingly, directly or indirectly. This thing happened, number 1. Number 2, let me not go into the details. If you look at Plato's Republic, he creates an ideal state. Callipolis he calls, which was ridiculed by others as utopia, where he talks about 4 types of existence, 4 types of people, 4 classes of people. On a basis of his theory of soul, he says a soul has 3 parts: upper, middle, lower, and the developments are differently in different people, and depending upon the development, they fall into one class. So we created 4 classes. I'm not going into the details, which itself will take half an hour. 4 classes, which is a repetition of the Varnashrama Dharma of the Vedas, number one, Vedic in Sanatana period. That's one thing. Then another thing, look at the Hellenistic religion. The Hellenistic religion is something of a reflection, mirror image of the Sanatana Dharma, Hindu Dharma. Go into the details, things will speak to you by themselves. So, the Greek knowledge tradition, which is, I would say, completely influenced from Bharatiya knowledge tradition, that's the reason for that. They have come to Bharat, not only just the Greeks. If you see, the entire world civilization has the mark of Bharatiya knowledge tradition on it. Investigate it. It may not be easy to demonstrate, but then you can find out. And the person honestly looking, sincerely looking, will get convinced. So, Greek civilization, from where Europe began after papacy. But Europe didn't understand the link between Greece and Bharat, and Europe missed the Bharatiya link, which made European knowledge tradition distinctly different from Bharatiya knowledge tradition to them. That's speculative. Ours is experiential. Bharatiya knowledge tradition is experiential. European knowledge is speculative. Greek knowledge tradition is speculative based on experience because of the influence of Bharat. This is just the beginning of a thought. Those who are interested can find out. Amazing riddles you will find in front of you. How this thing happened. Then, to find out, man wants to get solutions, create solutions. He will at once go to the occult theory of aliens providing. They were not aliens. They were enlightened Hindus. Hindu is a later term, calling them as Vedic people, enlightened Vedic people who had developed their inner selves into consciousness. Rather, Chaitanya, Chaitana, etc., etc., etc. Just beginning, we shall meet again. Namaste. Jai Bharat, Jai Siya Ram.